Welcome to the Insurgency with me, Steve Baker, the podcast which helps you get beyond the gossip of Westminster to the issues that really matter in all our lives. Joining us is the Director of Fighting for a Free Future, Harry Richer. Harry, what are we discussing today?
Thank you, Steve. So today we have James Graham joining us. James is the Senior Research Fellow for Financial Freedoms at the Prosperity Institute. He is a keen critic of ESG and DEI initiatives and financial sector overreach. He is currently leading the Prosperity Institute's campaign for debanking, which aims to turn statistics into stories and shame banks and regulators into action. Now, one of those statistics is that 500,000 people were debanked in 2024, which is a shocking statistic to me. Let's get into it, Steve.
Well, James, it's absolutely brilliant to have you here. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, as I've been a politically exposed person. I think I still can be sometimes treated as a politically exposed person. So I've been given the run round by the financial system. Tell us what's going on. What's the top line?
Well, it's a huge scandal. It was exposed in 2023 by Nigel Farage, who, as everybody knows, was debanked. He refused to back down. And he exposed debanking as an issue.
Yeah.
As Harry mentioned, we've now come to discover that almost 500,000 people were debanked last year alone. At the sharp end, you have, like you say, politically exposed people who are debanked for political reasons, for reasons of ideology. I mean, that represents an attack on free speech, and it's a massive issue. But on the other end, you have hardworking people who are debanked for a variety of reasons, for not having enough money in their accounts, for inconsistent payments. They don't know why they've been debanked, and it happens to them.
So what does inconsistent payments mean?
Well, that's a good question, and that would be a question for the regulator to answer.
Right.
It's relatively poorly defined in the 2017 regulations, but it is, rather than receiving a paycheck once a month, if you're a plumber or an electrician.
Oh, I see.
You receive £100 one week, £2,000 the next week,
Okay.
£10 the next week, and this is viewed as suspicious.
Well, this is Kafkaesque, isn't it? So if you don't receive your income regularly enough, somehow you're committing an offence in this crazy world we live in.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes to a really fundamental issue with the regulations, which is in Britain, we have ancient principles which treat everybody as innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, absolutely. If only we always did, yeah.
Exactly. And that should apply in the financial realm just as much as anywhere else.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the regulators now treat everybody with a basic level of guilt, and it's up to them to prove their innocence or to be debanked.
So tell us, why does the regulator do that? Where's the source? Is it ESG ideology or is it regulations? Because presumably what the banks want to do mostly is maximise profit. So why are they taking this approach? Are they forced to do it by regulators?
Yes, there's a range of factors, but the regulation around anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing is probably the main one. Those regulations cost banks, at the last count, about £34 billion a year. So if you take a plumber with not too much money in his account, he has inconsistent payments, so the bank has to conduct enhanced due diligence on him.
Yeah.
So it's quite expensive for the bank to service his account.
Mm-hmm.
So actually his bank account might not be profitable for the bank.
Yeah.
So they just shut that down.
No, I saw that actually. If I may, I'll tell you a little story. So I went, when I started my business, Baker Strategy, I went to look at HSBC because First Direct don't do business banking. So I looked at their parent HSBC. They have 3 tiers of bank account. The lowest level won't deal with PEPs. The second level needed me to borrow 100,000, if I recall correctly, and the third level was way out of the range of what I needed to do. So it effectively meant they could not offer me a bank account as a politically exposed person.
That's right.
It's crazy.
And I think that's actually a really important point, because the statistics in debanking are about 500,000 a year, but that leaves out all of the people who haven't been able to open a bank account. And that has a chilling effect on civil society and on free speech. So, for example, I don't know if you are familiar with the Open Justice Project and Adam Wren. They're doing fantastic work in grooming gangs, trying to expose the horrors. And they had to go through, I believe, 5 different banks before they were able to open an account. He told me he expected it to take an afternoon. It took several weeks. And I mean, that's just one example.
And what excuses or reasons did the banks give for not opening a bank account? Did they give any clarity, or did they just say no?
Do they have to give any clarity?
I think that if they are not opening an account for you, they don't have to give you any clarity. I think they didn't give him any clarity.
Mm-hmm.
But if they close your account, they do have to give you a reason and 60 days notice. But the reason is often incredibly vague.
I mean, we should dive into this 500,000 people figure, because that is, you know, what, 130 members of the UK public have been debanked. That is crazy. And, you know, I know it shot up from, you know, about 10 times less than that just about 6 or 7 years ago. Why is it just the new forms of this kind of legislation, enhanced checks that have shot that up? Or do we find that there's a culture now within banks that has really lent itself to this problem?
So in 2017, just over 6 years ago, we had an expansion of the money laundering regime. And that was actually inherited EU law, which we have kept.
Of course it was.
Which, I mean, preferably we would get rid of. So you have that, which has brought many, many more people and businesses into scope. But since then, you have also had a massive rise in ESG investing and ESG attitudes in banks, which have made banks a lot more concerned about their reputational risk, as you say. So the convergence of those two things has had this effect.
Well, okay, it's one thing for Nigel Farage to be debanked. He's a very, very big figure. Of course he is. And it's another thing for somebody like me to not be able to get a bank account and be able to sit here with a platform and complain about it. But let's talk about the little guy. What does it actually mean for somebody who doesn't have a public voice? Presumably, they just end up with what amounts to the oppression of either losing or failing to gain banking services and nothing they can do about it.
Sure, yes. So to tell you one story, there was in 2023, there was a couple, and I read their story in a niche financial newspaper.
Yeah.
They were in Wales, pensioners. They were debanked.
Yeah.
They were given 60 days notice. They missed the letter. Their bank account was closed down. They were no longer able to receive their pension payments. They were no longer able to insure their car, because you pay with your car through your bank account. So they lost access to their vehicle. They couldn't go shopping. They had to live off the frozen food in their freezer for several months before their daughter-in-law, I believe. I mean, you have to understand this is a very shameful thing. It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But people have no access to their money and they're embarrassed. So this elderly couple didn't want to tell anybody.
Because they felt like they'd been shamed by the bank.
Exactly.
They must have felt like they probably did something wrong.
Exactly, which they didn't do anything wrong. So that happened to them. Eventually their daughter helped them out and went in hard on the bank and forced them to reopen an account. But I mean, that's one story of close to 500,000.
Yeah.
So
this is what people forget, isn't it? The power that a bank has over people. I think for somebody like me who's a politician, I'm used to getting beaten up in public, so I don't care if it's water off a duck's back, something like that. But for normal people who lead private lives and, can easily be shamed, that's an enormous power wielded by bank officials, isn't it?
It is. It's an enormous power. And you have to be slightly careful in blaming the bank officials because they're tied in by this regulatory framework that holds them personally accountable if any financial crime is committed. So their risk aversion is justified to some extent.
Well, see, that's a fair point, because I've always said in relation to civil servants, we shouldn't blame officials. It's always ministers' fault. But here's the thing, because I bet it's not financial sector regulators' fault either. They'll be blaming the law. And we've already said that the law is inherited from the EU. So in the end, this comes back down to ministers and politicians, doesn't it? They need to change the law. So have they changed the law adequately? I think there's now a 90-day notice period before debanking.
I think that they haven't, to be honest. I mean, no matter how long the notice period is, the reality is most people, well, not most, but many people miss the notice that their account is going to be closed. People move addresses often.
Yeah.
People receive many junk mail letters.
So, James, obviously massive injustice for ordinary folks who can easily feel shamed by banks and the regulations and not know what to do. But I'm really concerned to hear about the effect on national security. So isn't it a considerable portion of defence SMEs have had problems with banking?
Yes, 75% of defence SMEs have experienced debanking or been refused access to basic financial services.
3/4. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary. And what's the driver there? Is it money laundering? Is it anti-terrorism? Or is it some kind of flawed ESG idea?
All of the above, really. The SMEs, it tends to be more the money laundering regulation. So if you deal in weapons or if you export, you're automatically treated as high risk. So there's a much higher likelihood that you will be shut down. And people forget when they think about defence SMEs, people think about BAE Systems and Babcock, which are worth billions. But many of the SMEs, which are essential in the supply chains, they employ 10 people in a rural town.
Yeah.
And actually their bank account holdings are quite small. So it comes into the same category as what I was saying with the individuals who don't have much money in their account.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just simpler for the banks to shut them down.
It's simpler, and it's because it's not profitable to do the checks.
Exactly. And there is also an ESG element in that banks are often under pressure to divest and shut down customers who engage in the defence industry because it's viewed as uncouth.
Which is an amazing thing to say at a time in which British national security is under threat, whether it's China, Russia, or other actors. It feels almost like they are working against our national security interests. Now, where the blame lies is something we've discussed in a different question. But I'd be very interested to know is, do any other countries have the kind of similar experience to the UK, or is this a more kind of uniquely UK-based problem?
No, the problem, unfortunately, is quite widespread across the West. So in America, under the Biden years, there was a concerted, if your listeners Google, something called Operation Choke Point. There was actually a concerted effort to debank people of certain political opinions, and pressure was put on the banks to debank those individuals. But on defence, the regulatory regime, I mentioned we inherited the law from the European Union. The law that the European Union put in place was developed by an international organisation called the Financial Action Task Force. So these regulations are generally global in scope and have similar implications everywhere.
Do we think that the Financial Action Task Force bothered to check whether banking, deposit taking in particular, would still be profitable after these regulations were implemented, or did they just take for granted the banks could absorb it?
I think they took it for granted. Unfortunately, I think these international organisations, like our own civil service, generally don't think about unintended consequences, and they don't care about them. And so just on the previous point, when you asked if this is a problem elsewhere, it's a problem in the Western world. The enemies of the West don't care about these regulations. I don't think Russian SMEs are being debanked for operating in the defence industry.
And just taking a kind of wider issue, because there's obviously there's a threat there to national security, but also just in terms of pure economic productivity, 500,000 people being debanked in a year is going to take a massive hit to all of their productivity and therefore the productivity of the UK.
Absolutely. No, it's a huge issue. Actually, one of the interesting things is one of the high-risk categories for being considered one of the categories that puts you at high risk of coming under this regulation is being involved in foreign exports.
All foreign exports?
All foreign exports. So and that is something which the huge businesses can navigate easily enough. But for smaller SMEs, who, like I say, they're not that productive. Sorry, they're incredibly productive, but they're not necessarily that high value.
They haven't got a team of lawyers.
Exactly, they haven't got a team of lawyers. That puts them at risk of being debanked, and they very often are debanked. And it's incredibly difficult for them to open bank accounts overseas. So it has had a real dampening effect on global trade from a UK perspective for the SME sector. Which, slightly separate point, but these regulations came in 2017, which was around the time of Brexit. We haven't been the most competitive in trade since 2017, and this just reflects the point that there's so many factors at play that it's hard to separate the two things.
Yeah, of course, in 2017 we were still a member state, so we were obliged to adopt the regulations even though we had voted to leave.
That's right.
So I'm just trying to tease apart the different factors here. So if we ask, could it be ESG going wrong? Could it be ideological and so forth? Actually, it feels like it probably boils down primarily to being a mechanical consequence of imposing the cost of these regulations in most cases. It feels like that's what actually we're saying.
Fundamentally, yes. There are cases where it is obvious that it's ideological discrimination.
Yeah. Can you give us any general example where that's happened?
Yeah, sure. So there's a great man called Reverend Richard Fothergill.
Yeah.
In 2023, his bank did a survey, a customer feedback survey.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Christian minister.
Yeah.
He responded to the survey something to the effect of, "Thank you for looking after my money, but I wish you spent more time focusing on looking after my money rather than engaging in Pride Month activities."
Mm-hmm.
Completely legitimate. He received a response from his bank saying, "Our relationship has irrevocably broken down and we are closing your account." So that is a clear example
Mm-hmm.
of ideology. But I imagine AML regulations were used to make that legally viable for them to do.
I see.
So the two are interlinked.
Yeah.
But in most cases, I don't think it is ideological discrimination.
Right.
But it's used to allow that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to tease in that a bit more, so it would be against the law to debank someone purely because of their political position. You would have to find another reason to do so, or is political exposure, can that be the only reason legally why you could debank someone?
Legally, you can debank somebody if they... Legally, there's very little stopping a bank from debanking individuals or businesses for pretty much any reason. But crucially, they have to give them a reason for why they've been debanked. And if they don't give them a legitimate reason, it's considered illegal.
Mm-hmm.
But if they don't have a reason to debank them, then, I mean, what our campaign is trying to achieve is to create reputational risks for the bank by doing so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Create this kind of reverse pressure.
Exactly.
You know, that you've had from the other side. So tell us more about the campaign and kind of who you've spoken to, what you're doing with it, where you're hoping it's going to go.
So we are an online campaign primarily. We are trying to gather the stories of those who have been debanked. The stories are coming in nicely. It's exciting because as we gather the stories, it increases the chance of pushing back against debanking. But it is also really sad because the stories are tragic.
Yeah, they're awful.
We have ordinary people with small businesses who have had to fire employees. We have people who have been forced out of their homes because their accounts they used to pay their mortgages have been debanked. We have small businesses really in trouble. And these are stories which just remind us constantly of the importance of bringing an end to debanking. And what we want to do is gather more of these stories and use them to amplify this issue and to put pressure on the regulator and on the legislators to change course.
So that's it. Pressure on the regulators and the legislators to change course, change legislation. How do you think that the regulators and legislators will respond to the demand? Because actually they might well come back and say, "What? So you want less regulation on money laundering? You want less regulation on counter-terrorist finance?" I mean, we've got to win this argument because at the moment it feels like the cure is worse than disease. We're ending up with a massive injustice being perpetrated against ordinary people. And actually, I'm not absolutely convinced that there'll turn out to be any evidence. A bit like the fraud campaigns. Loads of things have been done to try and prevent fraud. It's not working. Fraud's soaring. It feels like the cure will be worse than the disease here. So what's the path to success?
I think the path to success is, firstly, as I say, highlighting how harmful this is.
Yeah.
Because anti-money laundering regulations aren't cost-free.
Yeah.
There's a huge cost, and it's ruined lives and ruined businesses, and the opportunity cost, which we can't even quantify.
Mm-hmm.
And the second part is taking a critical look at these regulations and seeing if they have made any positive impact. And what I've seen so far, the evidence gathered, is that there has not been a reduction in money laundering since they were introduced in 2017. And if there hasn't been a reduction, why on earth are we doing them, pursuing them, when there are so many negative consequences? But fundamentally, I think we need to go back to a common law approach. The responsibility for catching criminals and stopping crime lies with the police, not with banks. In the same way, it's not up to a supermarket to stop somebody buying a knife they're going to use for a crime. It's not up to a bank to stop somebody moving money somewhere that's going to be used for criminal activity. Obviously, there's a basic duty to report suspicious activity, and we should maintain that. But we need to get rid of this arbitrary view whereby banks are the de facto police of the financial world.
So you've said that it's an online campaign. What can the public do if they have a story that they would like to share with you?
Oh, well, they should go to prosperity.com, and on the top of our page we have a debanking section. They click into that, and there is a form which they can complete, and we would love them to complete.
Well, there we go. This is Fighting for a Free Future. Today we've heard how regulatory overreach is creating massive injustice for very large numbers of people because banking's been made unprofitable by regulations which appear not to be effective. So it's the same old story. You can play your part. Go to prosperity.com, report your stories and help these excellent guys, these brilliant teams, to come up with the campaign which will help solve a problem which you face.